David is an architect and educator. His practice makes figurative architecture through collaborative design processes that celebrates the heterogeneity of the contemporary city. David will discuss recent projects by the office that explore the theme of the reuse, from using buildings fragments to repurposing parts uses through performance. So please help me welcome in the most warm way, David Kohn.
Thank you very much, Alberto. Well, thank you for the invitation. Thank you very much, Graham, too, and to the Royal College of Art. Yeah, it's exciting to be here. Obviously, this lecture's been in the planning for a while, but in the last week, there's been a lot of changes, as you all know, and it's been a very rapid change for me, my office, people in education, to deal with the new reality, and I guess this is part of it. So it's exciting. It's my first webinar. I understand the Royal College of Art Architecture Department's first webinar. So it's a bit of an experiment, so we're looking forward to see how it pans out. Now the talk I've prepared, I've tried to tailor it to the format. So it's completely new and in some ways unlike other presentations, although if you have been to a talk of mine, the projects will be familiar. I plan to talk for about 3/4 of an hour. We're intending to have a break about halfway through. Again, that's a kind of to try and react to the format where normally there would be more interaction between an audience and the speaker. So at that point, there could be questions and more at the end. So I called the lecture Joyful Convergence Adventures in Reuse. And the plan is to talk about ideas around reuse through stories and then illustrate those stories through projects in the office. The stories are ones that I've written since the beginning of the practice, and they were not written to be associated with any particular project. So the fact that they're being put together with projects tonight is a first. It's also the first time they've been presented not on the written page. So the first, there's the first group of 3 and a second, and they span from the beginning of the practice. And I suppose why stories? Partly it was also to do with the theme of reuse, the possibility of text as being this serial way to engage with architecture from a very different entry point. I think also there's an interest in how stories can prepare you for how you might encounter architecture, and that maybe together they form an extended cultural project. In some ways, as a type, they're very much informed by parables in a way, like those told by Italo Calvino in his 1972 Invisible Cities. And the stories are going to be read by a colleague of mine, Bushra Mohammed. So there'll be brief pauses as she reads from the texts, and then I'll go on to say something about the text and then talk through the projects. Okay, so the first text I wrote back in 2009, it was published in the Welsh School of Architecture magazine, and it was following a brief review that the academic Peter Carl, who I knew well at the time, as he was a former tutor of mine, had written, saying that the approach of our practice to the city is a species of architectural jiu-jitsu, whereby subtle interventions activate the rich thematics and history of a site. And so in response, I wrote this essay that was very important at the beginning of the practice, and I hope to show you how it's kind of woven its way through subsequent projects. So there'll be a short bit of reading from it.
For its adherents, Jiu-Jitsu is seen as superior to all hard techniques because of a familiar philosophical inversion. The greatest hardness can only be achieved through its opposite. The word flexible never means weakness, but something more akin to adaptability. For its adherents, Jiu-Jitsu is seen as superior to all hard techniques because of a familiar philosophical inversion. The greatest hardness can only be achieved through its opposite. Flexible never means weakness, but something more akin to adaptability and open-mindedness. Gentleness always overcomes strength. Rather than an expectation of ever-increasing levels of energy to overcome a given situation, Jiu-Jitsu requires a willingness to redirect energy and to therefore invent a response that will fit the form of the attack. Jiu-Jitsu urbanism might describe a 21st century approach to contending with the potential energy of the contemporary city.
So that brief excerpt from the essay, I think, sets the scene for a kind of approach to working in existing situations where recognizing the need for change, but perhaps the absence of the means to enact it through kind of radical transformation physically of what you have, could one achieve the same radical transformation through reusing the energy that already exists in the city in simple ways that may be just through rehousing different uses in different buildings, but it also may be changing people's perceptions to the city that already exists so that they use it in different ways. I'm now going to show a couple of projects at very different scales that are informed by this particular story. So the first was a very early competition we did. It was run by the Arts Council in 2009 to imagine the art space of the future. The context at the time was dwindling investment in the arts, and that hasn't changed. There was concern for the environmental impact of running arts institutions, how they would contribute to the environmental crisis, which of course has only grown. There was also the concern for how would one widen access to the arts and to different and new audiences. We thought to look at London as a whole and to find the gaps that might be a way into the city. And this is a drawing by the Greater London Authority of all of the park spaces in London. So we started to imagine, could you use parks as the art spaces of the future? And in order to be addressing climate change, could the arts centres be self-sustaining? And we thought that we could plant parks with portions of willow coppice, which at the time was seen as a very positive way of generating energy, and there are quite significant subsidies, and that has now changed in the last 10 years. It's considered to be more polluting nowadays. But the three stripes you see in the square, they are 3 years of willow coppice at the scale of the most significant park networks in East London. So here was a kind of vision of what this might be like, that one could grow willow coppice selectively, and in the foreground is the Arts Centre that also doubles as a power station. So it's like Tate, but actually Tate Modern, but actually a functioning power station. The stripes are the willow coppice, and the crop circles are where it's been cut selectively a third each year to provide enough crop to run the power station. But then that also becomes this very plastic landscape that's moulded to create this shifting set of venues. So here's the process of coppicing the willow, and this is the kind of crop circle that might be made. And so this idea that one could not only shape events or installations, but actually the whole infrastructure of this art space would be shifting every year. The building itself would be all the spaces that artists choose to work in cities that are not white cubes, so a church-like space like Dilston Grove, for example. And those would be gathered around the power station. So here's a kind of section through the art space of the future with a domestic scaled art space, interior gardens, and a church-like space. And then finally, you can see here, it's in its setting. So the second project I'm going to show, which is at a very different scale, the opposite scale, is the Universal Display System, which was designed for the Design Museum, which every year has an exhibition of the best designs of the year. And we were asked to make a bespoke display for a set of objects that we would not know their scale or type until very late, a few weeks before the presentation, which was to do with the judging. So this had to be a very, very flexible display system. And we questioned the logic of using new materials for every year and every show, and could we make a system that could be reused either by the Design Museum or others in the future. And we went so far as to treat it conceptually as a kind of autonomous project to the extent that the Design Museum allowed us to retain copyright for this system. So this was the floor of the museum, and we initially sketched an idea of this set of plinths that would have this a system that could be recombined, a kind of modular system that could be recombined to suit different scales of objects in different relationships. We then set about trying to make a system that could be redeployable, that would be easy to store, lightweight, and could be moved perhaps with traveling shows or to other venues. So the first version was these steel frames on the left, which were approximately 10 times the budget. So then through looking into tap manufacturing, we found a company in India that started to make the corner spigots, and there's a first and second version. But one of the difficulties was if you wanted to make this very lightweight reconfigurable system, and we want to use carbon fiber for the rod, so a bit like tent technology, the tolerances are critical, and we had great difficulty in kind of resolving engineering. This is Praveen Sharma of Bishan International. So this was 10 years ago. Working over video calls was unusual at that point, but now we know that this is every day, or certainly has been for about a week. And he did an amazing job of gradually changing the manufacturing processes so that we could achieve the tolerances that allowed us to then quite quickly erect the system. And one of the reasons that I chose to show this today, because it's an old project now, is recently a museum has shown interest in reusing the system. So 10 years on, it's actually going to fulfill its ambitions as a project. So here is one of the configurations from the show, and examples of how the graphic boards for display and captions were completely integrated, as were the electrics. Okay, so the next chapter is mirrored buildings, and as before, there'll be a short reading. This was part of a series of stories that were published on a couple of occasions, the last on these boards as part of a show that Pete Kapos curated, which I contributed on the subject of the unfeasible, and I chose to write about unfeasible ideals.
Last year, we finally made it to Anavidus. We arranged to stay with friends in the north of the city for a couple of days before moving to the south for the rest of the week. For the most part, people in the north live in freestanding villas surrounded by generous gardens. The predominant architectural style is classicism, and nearly all the villas have symmetrical porticos, wings, and rooflines. We discovered that it is fashionable to keep certain parts of one's house under lock and key, opening them only to impress guests on special occasions. These areas are usually the most lavishly decorated in the house, finished in bright materials, filled with statuary and punctuated by courtyard gardens. To offer a guest a key to the locked rooms and invite her to explore at her leisure after dinner is considered the height of hospitality. In the south of the city, by contrast, people live in apartments a fraction of the size of their northerly neighbours. The apartment blocks are generally built over generations and have the appearance of Gothic manor houses, having been added to and adjusted endlessly. An unexpected characteristic of the apartment block's interior architecture was the prodigious use of black mirrors. The mirrors are built into the architecture, filling doorways, niches, portions of walls and ceilings, or perhaps it's the other way around. The architecture is built around the mirrors. The effect is to make one unsure where the real world stops and the mysterious world of the mirrors begin. When we told our hosts over dinner of the lavish houses we had visited in the north, they rolled about laughing. Lavish? They scoffed. Why, all those hidden rooms and rituals are a poor man's attempt to recreate the magical spaces created by the black mirror, the most sought after and expensive commodity in Adavidis.
So that short story touches on issues of value and culture and open-mindedness, and I think it's interesting how, you know, if you travel, how the value of one architectural device in one place is valued differently elsewhere. And I think the projects I'm now going to show touch upon this topic, but as I said before, these were not written to illustrate projects, so this connection is something that's special for this evening. So last year I collaborated with the artist Simon Fujiwara on a project, the Salvator Mundi experience. This was an installation as a part of the exhibition Is This Tomorrow, which was at the Whitechapel Gallery, curated by Lydia Yee. And there was a number of artist-architect collaborations that was 50 years after the This Is Tomorrow show, also at Whitechapel. And this drawing is by Florian Bagel and Philip Christou. It's their proposal for the refurbishment of Central House, which is the office building on the right, which was done in 2013. So it shows you the relationship of the Cass Architecture School, which was in that building, to the Whitechapel. And that matters to me because I taught for 10 years at the Cass, and the refurbishment of this building was a real achievement, and it made for a fantastic school. And it was a great tragedy that a few years after it was refurbished, the building was slated for demolition. And I think that there's an aspect of this project which becomes clear towards the end, which reflects on that relationship. Although at the time of Simon and my collaboration, this was a kind of peripheral matter. This is the school as it was, and these are the screens that turned these open floors into cellular spaces that provided for studios, workshops and the like. And this is the installation that Simon and us made. So it's a one viewer museum, and it kind of drew on examples like this is the Jean Nouvel mock-up for Louvre in Abu Dhabi with his client from the Abu Dhabi Tourist Board, and this sense of being able to test something extraordinary, but also that the experience of it is immediate and affecting too. So we made this museum that would be for the Salvator Mundi, the Leonardo da Vinci painting, which was and remains the most expensive painting ever sold at auction. And it's a painting of Jesus Christ, and was due to be exhibited in the Louvre, Abu Dhabi. And Simon came with the idea of using this painting as the subject of a museum.
We've made a miniature museum called the Salvator Mundi Experience, and it's many versions of the same painting, but of course not the actual painting.
It's a giant attraction made into a miniature, but it's also an attraction within the gallery. So it's something that people queue for. You go in one by one. Ultimately, we're talking about effect. If our rendition didn't give you that effect, then it would just be a commentary on it rather than what we were hoping for, which is that it would also feel like an attraction in itself.
It's a lot about a future where maybe you don't need the art, maybe you don't need the architecture, maybe you don't need us, but you can, in some kind of algorithmical logic, produce museums and experiences from scratch.
So in this museum would be a series of rooms that tell the story of all of the moments in the painting's life, such as when it was rediscovered in a domestic stairwell, when it was put up for auction at Christie's, and here's actually a photograph of the actual auction day, with this kind of fascinating design. It was auctioned as part of a kind of contemporary collection. And this idea of an environment in which almost one doesn't need new art, one can encounter the same art in many different ways. One's just reusing it over and over. And also the architecture is effectively sampled from lots of different historic sites, so that again it's this kind of an architecture that may be designed without architects, but through some more digital process. And what was a strange opportunity was that the carpenter that we asked to make the installation had access to the timber from the Cass school, so that was reused to make the housing for the museum. So the next story is Cannibal Buildings, and again there'll be a short reading.
Down the road, a new housing block was going up. It stood on the site of a previous development from the 1980s, which was in bad condition, more because it had not been looked after than because it was poorly constructed. When the council decided to knock it down, there was a local outcry. How could so many buildings, only 30 years old, be of so little value so soon? Besides, the 1980s housing was an extension of a much larger estate, so if the extension was ripe for demolition, what about the rest? Residents had come to love the honey-coloured concrete terraces, walkways and party walls. During consultation about the new designs, there was consternation and a heated debate about what could be retained of the old scheme. Surely it had some virtues. The contractor was on hand to field just such a question. The honey-coloured concrete, he said, would be crushed and reused in the new construction. This was not what the local residents were expecting. There was much muttering as people took in the thought and asked themselves if this was a good or bad thing. Today, you can walk past the development and see flecks of colour in the low concrete walls surrounding the site. It's as though the new building has drawn strength from the lifeblood of its predecessor. The new walls are a watered-down version of the old walls across the road in the large estate. For those in the know, it is comforting and troubling in equal measure to know that the new building cannibalized the old one,
So I guess this story's about our relationship to the past and the difficulty of knowing how to always reuse it, but also how the future is often made of the past, and coming to terms with the past can in turn make a future. And the project I'm going to show now very much deals with these issues. So this is a live project that we're doing with Bovenbouw Architecture in Belgium. It's the conversion of a historic beguinage, which is like they're like almshouses that were for women to live in the centre of town, but secluded from society. And it's to convert the site into a public park and a new architecture faculty for the local university. So this is the centre of Hasselt, which is a medieval market town, and the green space is the centre of the beguinage. You might have heard of Hasselt recently because Francesca Torzo's fantastic scheme for the Z33. Let's see if I can put it up. You see this? Yeah. So that is Z33. It's a refurbished and extended arts organisation, and the remaining gardens currently are little used, and the beguinage, which is predominantly the L-shaped wing and the gatehouse at the entrance here, have gone in and out of use and were used by Z33 and have recently become available. So the city is keen to see this really important local monument put to public use. So the plan is to turn the gardens into a park, and at the centre are the ruins of a church that will become once again a significant part of the experience of the site. This is the kind of architecture. So there would have been highly divided private rows of private houses with this shared space in the centre. And what was remarkable was that the tallest building in Hasselt for centuries was this church, which was then bombed in the war, and the ruins of it now stand just behind. So the view on the right is today, and the ruins are hidden by those trees. And what was fascinating was to find out how few people remembered the church or stories of it when we did public consultations, but how significant the story became in telling the future of the site. So here's a view of what it will be like. The new park in the foreground, the remains of the church stabilised, inside the church a new reflecting pool. So this is a place for contemplation and relaxation, but it can also be, the pool can be drained and used for different public events. Maybe it's a book fair or an end of year show for the architecture faculty or their graduation ceremony. These drawings are by Julia Kramer, who's been the project architect, and show kind of very careful adjustments to all of the interior divisions and circulation spaces to recover quite a lot of the character of kind of almshouse-like character that was lost over the decades as its use as lots of private, quite intimate spaces was broken apart in order to allow other more contemporary uses in. And as an architecture faculty, we thought it'd be an extraordinary experience to kind of revisit some of that original domestic quality. So a lot of the spaces are now returned to kind of would be residential use for visiting academics, but then also larger spaces will be made in the roof for studios. And we have this opportunity to make very precise adjustments to the existing building to both retain its character, but ensure that it has the flexibility that's needed. So there's an example of a fireplace being turned into a doorway. And in the roof, we are reinstating a number of dormer windows and then creating new ones. And by flipping the glazed portion of the dormer window, we're able to create hanging walls that will work for well-lit studio environment. And the last piece of the puzzle is a tower that we're inserting on the site. And this will be higher than the original church that was destroyed. And when we spoke to local people in the consultation process, for most of the time they said, well, we don't want a tower because that's obviously a residential building. The thought that it might just be a belvedere purely for looking at the city only came about through, the kind of appreciation of it only came about through an understanding of the loss of the church. And that has now become perhaps a more significant story about the site than it has been for decades. So we thought we would break at half time. I'm conscious we're a bit over half time. So I don't know, Adalberto, there's a question or two.
Let's see. If you guys have any question, there is like a Q&A chat where you can type your question and we can see them. Otherwise, we cannot really hear you.
So it's the plan that you asked me.
Do you want me, or can you read them, or?
Okay, I can click. I guess okay.
Yeah, Q&A and.
Okay, so I guess this would be easier face to face, but let's try it. This is Emily. Hi, Emily, who's studying for a dissertation on humanitarian architecture. I'm wondering how this type of architecture might learn from your stories. Well, I think perhaps knowing a bit more about your description of humanitarian architecture would help. I don't know if that's possible. That would be. Does Emily then type away? I mean, I suppose. I mean, to be helpful, I'll answer it as best I can. I think that storytelling is based on a book called A Form of Aid, UN Architecture. Okay, thanks, Emily. Well, that works. So I think that stories can be a great way of, I guess, providing access to different types of architecture. And often I feel that, particularly working with clients, a lot of the design process is about developing a shared language for describing what it is that we're making, and that process is part of what makes it a shared enterprise. And somehow I think the success of the project is often if those using it and those stakeholders involved in the project are able to share in kind of ability to talk about how it works for them, why it works, and that is something that's built up often day to day in conversations, but then more formally, stories like this, I think, can help unlock how to use unfamiliar architectures. So, and then
we have like a few more.
So I mean, we've got a few more. I'll probably try one more. I'm conscious of time, and then we can perhaps pick up more at the end.
Yes,
yeah?
I agree. Let's pick the highest.
Yeah. Do you want to? Okay. So
do you want me to read them? The one that
I can see it's. Well, okay. So Ken, I mean, I kind of answered Ken's question a bit in the previous response. So Ken asks, do you place large emphasis on the creation of a narrative when approaching real life projects? Do you take on the role of a storyteller to the client? I said something about that. I think perhaps one thing to expand is that I think we like to feel, and I hope our clients feel, that the story of the project is something that is made together through the design process. I think we very much feel like, unlike some caricatures of architecture and design, we need our clients. We want to know what they're thinking, how they imagine, how they would live, would work, how they would use the space. And often it is through the conversation about often taking those ideas apart and then recasting them in ways that attract precedent or material possibilities is very much part of the process. I'm thinking time-wise, should we crack on? Do we have time for another one? Probably a bit over halfway through.
Yeah, or if you prefer like finishing the presentation, then we leave all the time for people to write the questions and also vote for them, so we get a better understanding.
Okay, great.
Okay, cool.
So thanks, Emily and Ken. Okay. Right, now I'm going to try and, how do I get rid of that then? Okay, so on with the stories. The next is chimeric buildings, and again it'll be read by Bushra.
Next to the cathedral by Metropolis Square is a small cube-shaped church known as the Little Cathedral. Legend has it, our tour guide explained, that the church was founded in the 8th century by Irene of Athens, Empress of Byzantium. Irene, she continued, was the wife of Leo IV and mother of Constantine VI. Both men oversaw the widespread destruction of images and churches. Irene, on the other hand, venerated icons. During her 5-year reign, the policy was reversed and the production of images resumed. Women, we were told, played a disproportionate role in resisting iconoclasm. Irene, however, was eventually banished to the island of Lesbos, where she soon died. So it was fitting that the little cathedral is built of marble blocks covered with images of lions, peacocks, doves, flowers, sphinxes, geometric figures, and the tree of life. The images are incongruous from different cultures, carved by different hands and on different types of marble. My son, why is this building made of other buildings?
So I suppose that story is a kind of appeal for those kinds of architectures that are serially excluded from contemporary practice, that include symbol icons, a kind of richness of signification, and a kind of breadth of ways of making architecture communicate. And as before, I'm going to show a project that I think has some chimes with this particular story. So this is an ongoing project, the Greenwich Design District. So it's a project where we're designing 2 creative studio space buildings, and it's part of a master plan of 16 buildings by 8 architects on the Greenwich Peninsula for the developer Night Dragon. You see, so these are our 2 buildings, and we were interested in taking the opportunity to make a kind of communicative architecture that was very free in using different modes of communicating how it worked in the city. So, for example, having this very generous colonnade at the base, that it would be clear that it is an entrance to the site with this massive sign. And the 2 buildings, so you can see them, these 2, create also a street by having this kind of consistent language. And they borrow very heavily on architectural precedents. So on the left is the colonnaded front of the 19th century Royal Albert Dock warehouse that was converted in 1985 by James Stirling to become Tate Liverpool. And somehow I can never think of a more robust sense of arrival, of opening, of a kind of hierarchy to a building. Also the sense of a compression, that the weight of what it's holding up is really palpable, and the colour too, that this is kind of very autonomous element to the building. And I think I'm very interested in these architectures that are almost caricatures of themselves. And then on the right is the Maison de Verre from 1932 by Pierre Charot. Another extraordinary building. So the part that Pierre Charot designed is with the glazed bricks, and the story goes that the woman who lived in the apartment on the top floor refused to move, so they let her be and demolished the house under her and built this house and surgery for a doctor beneath it. And I think what I've always enjoyed about this building is how ambiguous its scale is. It's difficult to tell, is it large, is it small? It seems quite at odds with the windows above it. Again, there's a kind of kawaii, a kind of cuteness to the architecture that comes about, like, is it a kind of diminutive version of a much larger building? And then looking at the Scuola Grande di San Marco from the 15th century, which is a guild house. So an interest in if one is making creative studio spaces, is there a history to cities having districts for creative uses? And in a city like Venice or Antwerp, for example, there were rows of craft guilds, and they were always very elaborately decorated, communicating whether it be the patron saint or the skill set of its members. And on the right is a couple of pages from Learning from Las Vegas by Robert Venturi, Denise Scott Brown, and Stephen Isenor. And this is maybe the same kind of interest in iconography brought up to kind of post-war American strip, and signage at the scale of the car, or in reference to our project in Greenwich, at the scale of the bus, because our buildings stand directly in front of the bus depot. So This is an early sketch looking at combining all of these effects, the kind of oversized entrance, the green gridded facade that has this ambiguous scale, the sign that's speaking across the whole bus depot to new arrivals, and then on the corners these figurative sculptures that speak of the kind of craft kind of occupiers of the buildings. And then these are recent views that show all of these elements combined, and even now as a construction site the buses do go past, and this kind of sense of it being a kind of front door to the whole district is beginning to take shape. At the back, the idea of being a kind of receptacle for sculpture, here it's a series of niches on the back of the building that would have a rolling program of installations. And the second building further down the street, so simpler, it doesn't have that same frontal relationship to a large public interchange, so it's perhaps more modest, but what it does have is a rooftop terrace on its southern corner that looks over a park. And this is how it stands today, and here you can see it in its relationship to the O2 Arena, and so in a few weeks we'll be installing the colonnade and the facade and the sign. So the next story is facsimile buildings, and again we'll have a short reading.
Facsimile buildings. The fourth and final architect entered the room, followed by 6 young men carrying an enormous model on a stretcher. Your Highness, I announce, the final presentation by the architect Dorothy Equinox. The day had been spent reviewing designs by several of the world's leading architects for the new royal palace. My role as Master of Ceremonies was to ensure that the presentations kept their allotted times and that the changeovers went smoothly. Miss Equinox, you have half an hour to present your proposal to His Highness. There followed a fair amount of shuffling as the stretcher was manoeuvred before the King's entourage. The model really was magnificent, a wedding cake-like confection of high bluffs, colonnades and caryatids. The King shifted his weight to the front of his throne and, after a moment's pause, addressed the model. Miss Equinox, am I not correct in recognizing your model as being of the Acropolis? With a perceptible relaxation in posture, Miss Equinox replied, Yes, Your Highness, it is. I'm delighted that you recognize its design. The King's brow furrowed as he stroked his moustache. But I do not want a copy of another civilization's great architecture. I want something new, something that sets my kingdom apart from others, that demonstrates my commitment to the arts and our country's progressive outlook. You cannot seriously be proposing that we build a copy of the Acropolis. Miss Equinox surveyed the room as though gauging her audience before replying. Great King, this would be no ordinary copy. Rather, I am proposing an undertaking of such extraordinary profundity and consequence as to astound all those who hear of it. Your Acropolis will not be a copy of the original, it will be the Acropolis itself. I propose that you do not use machines to cut the columns, but that you create craft skills with the knowledge to carve stone, and that you do not import the stone, but that you find new quarries and build roads to service them. For every broken stone in the former Acropolis, you will enact an event that leaves them the same result in your Acropolis. In short, you shall create a society capable of making an Acropolis, a perfect facsimile.
So that story is something about, I guess, the difference between the physical appearance of architecture and the whole process of making it, and all of the relationships that are necessary and therefore the society that's capable of making it, and the continuity of skills, and I guess the question of how much one chooses to engage in these much broader issues around the whole construction economy and skills base and the future of that. And the project I'm going to show again has some connection to the story. So this is a live project that I've been working on for 5 years now. It's a new quad for New College in Oxford. This is a model that's recently made of the main quad building out of Ancaster limestone, which is what the building will be clad in. And so in terms of reuse, it's both the question of the skills necessary to make this building, but also the hope that through the investment made now into the building's longevity, it will be serially reused, and that this is potentially a way of addressing climate change, is to make sure that buildings are capable of standing the test of time, and that the investment will be repaid in the number of times it's reused. This is New College's Great Quad, which is famed for being the first ever purpose designed and built in one phase quad that combined all of the different functions of a college, but for the first time in one mixed use building. And that became the kind of precedent for how Oxford grew and how colleges grew, and was a model that was exported to Cambridge and across the globe. And this is a map of Oxford showing all of the quads, and one can kind of imagine how each college has grown by adding further quads. And the brief was to create a new quad for New College that would be in keeping with the tradition of the type, but be entirely unique to the college and the site. So you can see New College at the bottom there. That is Great Quad there that you were looking at before. This is Garden Quad, which is a three-sided quad open to the landscape and to the city walls, which are here. And this is the site that we're currently looking at. And aware of the kind of changes in the architecture of quads over the centuries, if the first ever quad was a kind of courtyard cloister space that was designed to segregate the collegiate community from the town, so that's this kind of idea of town and gown was very much enshrined in this closed architecture. 250 years later, things had changed significantly, and the architecture reflected this much greater openness both to landscape and the city, and this coincided with also city folk being accepted to take up residence within the college. We were interested in this kind of slow shift of the relationship of the inside to outside, and in our proposal wanted to affirm a kind of equal status to both inside and outside, that the form of the one would be the kind of opposite of the other in a kind of jigsaw-like way, so that there is an equivalence, suggesting a continued progressive outlook towards the outside. This is the plan of the site, and this is the main quad building, and it's urban purpose is to make 3 south-facing quads. This is a grade 2 listed house, and these are also new buildings that are part of this proposal. The student rooms are gathered around the courtyard and also along the north elevation, and this is part of an adjacent school. This is the construction animation by Sir Robert McAlpine, who are the contractors currently on site, which shows how construction will progress over the coming years. And this is the eventual outcome. And what we're currently looking at is how to make the stone facade, how to achieve the kind of longevity and performance, how it should be jointed. And this is the quarry in Doncaster, where there's the red and beige stones that are used in the facade laid out. And there's a process of checking the stones, understanding how they'll be cut. Those are machines, so it won't all be hand carved. And this is a mock-up that begins to show the effect that the curvature of the facade combined with the south orientation will have in revealing the play of the light through the day as it changes with each hour. And the diamond pattern of the stone will further accentuate the kind of perceived curvature of the facades. And it's this stone envelope that is going to ensure the longevity of the building and its reuse. So the last project is a kind of story that we're in the process of writing. It's a competition we won earlier in the year to design the new markets for Birmingham, working with Lend-Lease and Birmingham City Council. It's a really exciting project that we're working with a local arts organisation, Eastside Projects, and artist Celine Condarelli. This is the image from the competition in which we were asked not to show any design proposals. So effectively, this is all the soft stuff. And our proposal is to really focus on the idea of a market as a site of performance, almost a kind of ongoing festival. And this is about also working with the market stall holders on how to build and extend their audiences with the hope that this becomes, you know, if not a national, an internationally recognized innovator within markets. And the idea of the collaboration is supported by the history of the city. This is the coat of arms, which has an artist and an engineer, and the idea that the city has always been made through their collaboration. And this is very much a project about working in a kind of transdisciplinary way with Eastside, Celine, and others being involved in all of the decision making. And I think, you know, this is a kind of amazing example. This is Sam Curtis's Centre for Innovation and Radical Fishmongery, which was a trade show run by Eastside Projects and curated by Catherine Boehm and Eastside Projects curator and artist as well, Gavin Wade. And this idea that one could create a kind of festival life to the market in which innovation is very much part of its DNA, would be a way for us to begin to build the eventual architecture around this performance. This is the site, and you can see that the rotunda of the 1960s on the left, and St Martin's in the Bull Ring, which is the Grade 2 star listed church and centre, and then Future Systems Selfridges building. And this photograph is taken from the former site of the wholesale market, and a very kind of inspirational project for the team was Agnes Dean's Wheatfield, A Confrontation, which is a 1982 art installation in New York, where a vacant development site was planted with wheat and had this extraordinary transformative effect. And the thought that this very large empty site could be start to be used for growing vegetables, gardens, that this meanwhile use that could be associated with the traders and restaurants for the market would eventually become part of the building proper, and that in a kind of continuous feedback loop, education programs that are established within the market could inform children's teaching programs, their kind of gardening at school, and there's a kind of constant kind of dialogue between the market and the city about innovative growing and the kind of use of food and cooking and health, and all of these fragments of the scheme we would seek to kind of keep quite loose and rough, so that there wouldn't be an attempt to smooth out the differences, and that this would also maintain a kind of sense of the heterogeneity of the kind of stakeholders and different communities on the site. And that's where we coined this a joyful convergence. And the building itself would be guided by principles of reuse, the hope that through, this is the shearing layers drawing by Frank Duffy, which suggests that different layers of a building have different lifespans, and that successful reuse is enabled by being able to easily take apart the building at different times to be refitted. So this is an example from the competition from Price and Myers' vision of how the structure and services could always be kind of rewired for different generations, but that the building would remain fundamentally useful. And this is a kind of last part of the puzzle. I'm currently teaching with colleague Bushra Mohammed at the Architectural Association, and this is our students with Gavin Wade at Eastside Projects. And we've been looking at how performance can be a kind of integral part of a kind of architecture practice, both as a method but also as an idea for how buildings work. And I'm going to finish with a short film by Yoav Kaspi, who's one of our students, about a performance within Eastside Projects around the idea of looking at Birmingham and finding new ways to inhabit the city.
Before us lay remnants of the Inner Ring Road, a 1960s infrastructure plan for Birmingham City. Sir Herbert Manzouni, chief city planner of Birmingham. And now we are in front of the Co-op factory, a Grade 1 listed industrial Victorian building.
So thank you very much for listening. That's the end of the presentation, and I'm very happy to take on any questions.
I'm getting back as well. And oh, we had like a lot of questions. Would you like me to read them so I can see?
Okay, I've got them here. So I start with Valerie.
Yes.
Are you seeing the same things? Yeah. So Valerie asked, where do you think the borders lie between architecture, design interiors? Your practice and projects blur the lines between all of them, much like our interior design program itself. Does that matter to your practice and how you approach projects? Yes, I mean, historically, I've been very aware that certain aspects of design have been excluded from architecture, and I think interiors seems to be a discipline that comes in and out of focus in different generations and different places. And I suppose I feel that that's a travesty and that if one places experience at the center of the architectural project, then kind of what is the boundaries of the discipline should be what has impact on one's experience. And if that is, you know, call it interiors, call it graphic design, call it what you will, I think it all matters. And if the route to achieving that richness and that kind of fullness of experience is collaboration, well then so be it. It's if in different eras and places it's a much more centralized discipline with a lot more overlaps. I think it's probably going to be more and more specialized and require more and more more and more collaboration as we become more reliant on people with different, often more technical understandings of aspects of projects. If that answers the question. Vicky, hello Vicky. How important is public space in your work? And are there any principles that drive your approach to designing public space, whether interior or exterior? Yes, I think public space is somehow at the core of our interests. I think in the projects I've shown, I would say that many of them have started with a thought to their urban circumstances and how any intervention relates to what's already there. So whether it's in Hasselt and the creation of this park, or in Birmingham and the sense that it is this kind of territory of performance that is actually what we're making, and that the hardware, if you like, the architecture, is the means to sustaining it. Yeah, you know, arguably public space is the kind of central issue, and I think in your question, I think what you're pointing out that's very important is the role of public interiors, which I think is something that, again, through history has come in and out of focus, and one's kind of very aware of, you know, something like the Royal Festival Hall as an example of an extraordinarily generous public space in which there's many different people doing many different things simultaneously, and that is almost like a park folded in on itself, and that degree of publicness, that generosity, is probably very hard won, and I think increasingly needs, you know, advocates. So I would say, yeah, the kind of the public interior even more than the public exterior, is in need of constant advocacy. So Marsden, can you talk a little bit more about the connection between the Cass Whitechapel and the Salvatore piece? Well, I mean, again, that was a bit fortuitous. So we were, so Tom Graham, who's the kind of brilliant designer maker who made the timber shell for the installation. We went to him because I've worked with him before and I knew he'd do a great job, and he said, I've got this, I've got all the timber from the Cass, and that's something he'd salvaged, and he's very interested in reuse, and I think he's been able to use the material for all sorts of projects. And I suddenly realized that, you know, it was a choice, would we want to use it? And of course we would, because it just adds another dimension to the project that was completely unexpected, and to me, nonetheless, quite potent. It wasn't in any way a driver for the project, but I felt like it still resonated, and certainly personally, I think the Cass is a fantastic school, and the time that I was there, you know, it was a brilliant, also a brilliant place across the road. And so to kind of find, I guess that's the nature of making things, is that there's always this possibility of these connections to, you know, through materials and construction to other places, other people. And I guess this was a surprising, a very acute example. Wow. So Valerie's got a very technical question. Are you concerned with the high porosity of the limestone for the Oxford quad, making it less durable and therefore less reusable over time? Interesting question. So that particular kind of limestone, Ancaster, has traditionally been used for you know, church building. There are examples of it standing for centuries, and in fact the bed that we're using is the hardest bed that was historically used for windowsills and those parts of the building that would be exposed to rain and dripping, and historically it would not have been used for facing stone because it's so hard to cut, and it's only because nowadays one's cutting with machines that it's possible to use this stone, particularly in the way that we're doing it with kind of curved surfaces, as facing stone. So yes, it's been I could show you examples of buildings that have of this stone from other beds that are centuries old, and this would be harder. So no problems, we hope. Right, Gregorios. So I think I can see a kind of allegory behind your stories, which resembles a bit that of Italo Calvino's writings. Does your design include features and parts for reflection and deeper thinking like this? Spaces that imply a questioning to the norms of architecture and our way of thinking about it. I think that in the stories there are many characters and events portrayed that are about the making of architecture and maybe are difficult to find in the experience of architecture. And therefore I think, you know, the architectural competition as an event and a performance is very much something that one lives. The idea of patronage and a relationship between an institution and a design team, you know, that is you know, a lived reality, a set of relationships, and the stories are able to touch upon that. And I think certainly one is able to understand in architecture something of those relationships, but not with the kind of precision of a text. So I think often the stories are about the making of architecture and the physical outcome, rather than about spaces. But that said, I mean, I would hope that there is a poetics of space that was kind of evident in the buildings, and I think perhaps the example you've picked is the most archetypal, or but I would say that there's scope for that kind of richness within the smallest and most domestic of spaces too. How are we doing?
We have time for one last question.
Yeah.
And then we can.
Do I need to scroll? Do I do?
Okay.
Oh, here we go.
You can pick any of the one remaining. Maybe whichever you want.
Okay. Okay, so your New College Oxford project utilised a heavy stone, which becomes a complete dichotomy to your Birmingham Smithfields project, which is promoting diversity of options. What is the value of materiality in expressing the function and purpose of each project? Thank you. Thank you, Haru. I think that both projects try to use the economy of their means to achieve some kind of economy of purpose. So by that I mean the building that is built of stone because of its context, and that is the building where the hope is that it will stand for hundreds of years, and the investment materially in terms of carbon and pounds and pence will pay dividends in it being happily used for centuries. I think in Birmingham it's a very different economy, and the use of the building is likely to change more frequently, and the requirement for it to be more flexible is going to I guess happen at a completely different rate. And I think the hope is that the design will be tailored to that kind of cycle of reuse, and that there is a kind of intelligence around which parts are going to be the most persistent and which parts are going to be the most likely to be changed. I could imagine elements of Birmingham being in stone, but I don't think they would be a stone facade. I think that's because as a building type, it's probably going to be much more like a landscape. There's a much more great emphasis on the horizontal, on the topography, on the idea of a building as a stage where different activities are presented, are made visible, where there's audiences and performers, whether that's literal performances like band playing, or a market stall holder attracting customers, and maybe the stone that would suggest a stone floor rather than a stone facade. So I think the materials and art, I mean, the question of which materials is kind of complicated, and pegged to a whole series of different issues, but it's not to say that you couldn't use stone in Birmingham. Be big menhirs holding up the roof or something. Okay. Okay.
I think we can close the lecture here, the first digital lecture. Thank you so much, David, to have been part of this journey.
Yeah, no, thank you all for joining us. Yeah, it's been great.
Thank you, Graham, and the program, Volunteer Design.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody, and thank you, David.
And thank you, everybody that has attended and who is already still attending, which are like still 100 people. And we got more than 200 people, which means that it was interesting and engaging, I think. And if you want to follow us or like to see the next lectures, you can follow us on Instagram. And what to say, stay safe and keep going with the good work, everybody, because I feel like strangely, like the situation makes us more connected than ever. So
yeah, absolutely. Can I just say something, Adalberto?
Yeah,
people are still on.
You can close the whole thing because you opened it.
I see. I just want to say thanks to David for doing this, because it's a real experiment, but it's a real opportunity for us to try and maintain some kind of semblance of connection and communication, etc. So, you know, really appreciate it. And thanks for everybody for turning out and asking some nice questions and tuning in and keeping in touch. We're seeing from the program and from the school lots of really hard and difficult ways of connecting and talking to each other and trying to get around this crazy situation that we're all in. So please keep talking to each other and keep talking to your tutors and myself. I'm answering 1,000 emails a day and keep them coming. It's no problem. Tomorrow I'm going to be talking to the reps in the afternoon just to try again to answer questions. So filter questions through to the guys if you can. And tomorrow I'm going to release 2 lectures which I've recorded, which are nowhere near as slick as David's in his digital presentation. And I'm going to put those up somewhere, I think probably Moodle, and then you can access them. And then I plan to host a session like this on Wednesday afternoon for a couple of hours, just for you guys to ask questions about what I've talked about, etc. And other members of staff have been asking how they can contribute to that and so on. So so all of you out there, I can't see you, but I can see you chatting and making questions and stuff like that. I just want to say, this is the first opportunity I've probably had to say hello to you all, but I just want to say, keep safe, look after yourself and your friends and your families, etc. And, you know, just be aware that we're doing everything we can to maintain our communications with you and our work and thinking, and we're all thinking of you. We had a staff so-called party on Friday afternoon just to say hello, and we all said how much we were missing you guys. So so keep in touch and look after each other. But thanks again, thanks to Alberto and Louisa, Julie, all the crew for sorting this out, and David. I'm sure David's exhausted by now. But thanks ever so much.
No, it was
David,
good,
nice
good
to see you, David.
Yeah, good to see you too. Thanks a lot.
Take care, man. See you soon, yeah?
Yeah.
Chat soon. Bye. Thanks, everybody. Good night.